Welcome to Acquired Brain Injury in the News. As you saw with the opening video there, the little clip, that was from 9 years ago, where a little more, depending on when you're watching this. This maybe a bit more than that. But this was a while ago. Mitch McConnell has a history of falling. And he's a member of the acquired brain injury family. Whether you like him or not, or where your politics stands, it's irrelevant. Because it's important. Our leaders are human for now. Whether you like him or not, or how you feel about him. And empathy is important. So it's necessary to try and understand. And since they represent us, admittedly, senators are focused on their state, of course, but still, we need to talk about things when they have medical issues. Those in Congress do tend to be significantly older than the average age of the average American. Thing is, and this is very important to understand, this is a YouTube video. This is a Friends of Brain Injury video on our website. This is a video on many different of our venues. So it's important to stress this. A video is not a doctor's office. It's not a place to get information for the replacement of a physician. All right, I want to stress that. And it is important also to understand that if you have not assessed somebody yourself, you cannot really make a good diagnosis. You just can't, because there are a lot of components to a good diagnosis. All right, imaging, labs, spending some time talking and interacting. So what we're going to do here, as you can tell, since I've been mentioning Mitch McConnell, we're going to be considering what we could be looking at with regards to what we've seen recently. Those of you who understand about brain injury and the topics I talk about, there are a couple different options as to what he could be dealing with, and some I won't touch on. I'm going to talk about 4 different things that it could be. First of all, let's take a look at a video showing, well, what it was that happened, and then talk about the different possibilities. All right, first of all, this happened twice. This.
Okay.
Senator, you're up for election in 3 short years. What are your thoughts on that at this point?
I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing you.
That's okay. What are your thoughts on running for re-election in 2026?
What are my thoughts about what?
Running for re-election in 2026.
That's
Did you hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026?
yes.
All right, I'm sorry, you all. We're going to need a minute. Senator Benny.
Yep.
Go ahead outside, sir. Come with us. Okay.
Somebody else have a question? Please speak up.
All right. So as you can see, he kind of just like froze up and seemed a bit disoriented as well. He also was smacking his lips like that when he was there, just kind of seemed like not aware. So what are the possibilities here? Now, you've heard others on the news talk about, well, first of all, one of the things it could be is what's known as a partial seizure. And a type of partial seizure called an absence seizure or absent seizure. So what is this? Well, first of all, seizures are grouped into 2 different types. You have a generalized seizure and partial seizures, sorry. General seizures and partial seizures. Now, a generalized seizure is typically what you would think of. That is the fall to the ground, lose control of your body, unconscious, bite your tongue, and arms, legs tremors, after stiffening up, a loss of control, bowel bladder, all that kind of stuff. That is a generalized seizure. General, whole body. Partial seizures are where you may or may not lose consciousness, depending on how significant, and how much of the brain it involves, the location where the seizure focus happens, that is where the seizure starts, and you may or may not have specific focal signs, that is, which systems it involves, and it may become a generalized seizure or not. It may spread across the corpus callosum, the connecting area in the brain that bridges the two hemispheres. It may spread through other connecting areas in the brain, deeper, and again, generalized throughout the brain, or it may remain partial. Now, absent seizures, obviously French word, but absent seizures are a specific type. Here is the list of symptoms associated with that. And with an absent seizures, these can be just a few seconds to a minute or two. They may involve a transient kind of dissociation, a disconnection like you saw. They may involve, if they're a complex type of absent seizure, you may also see things like lip smacking. You may see pulling on the clothes. You may see rubbing the nose, other things like that, other automatisms. They're related to temporal lobe seizures in some cases. They may even have an origin point there. They may have their origin elsewhere. Usually, these types of seizures are associated with a damage to either frontal, temporal, parietal, more cortical injuries, but they can be elsewhere. There's scar tissue, which becomes a focus for abnormal electrical activity. A partial seizure, that is of the absence type, looks like this on an EEG. And again, they only last for a very brief moment, and many times they're mistaken for an attention problem. Oh, they're not focusing, they're not paying attention. Kids, this is very common with kids. And they get treated for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADD, when they actually have an absent seizure. Okay, what else? It could be a transient ischemic attack. I talked about this in the stroke videos, where briefly, due to either vasoconstriction, blood flow to the brain, due to an artery tightening up, transiently, briefly, hence the TIA term, the T, or a brief blockage, either microvasculature or some of the larger arteries, just a temporary block, and causing stroke-like symptoms. Here, symptoms. Always remember the mnemonic, be fast. Okay, so we're talking about, facial droop, usually, that kind of asymmetry you see, problems with speech, oftentimes slurring of the words, some dizziness, discoordination, things like that. You may have, a good way to find out is to give them a phrase to say. If a person cannot repeat back something like "the sky's blue in Cincinnati," or whatever, some kind of phrase, you need to act quickly. They may have problems with balance. They may have problems with vision, focal neurological signs. So to specific symptoms, to specific like vision or hearing, or any of the senses, or motor deficits. So it's important. Just keep in mind, be fast over here, okay? That's another one. So maybe a transient ischemic attack, a mini stroke, it's also called. So keeping that in mind as a possibility. It doesn't look like that based on, you know, what we see here, but it's possible. I just want to stress the possibility. But with his long history of like falls and things like that, those of you who know I talk about adynamia, having kind of an adynamic depersonalization, where there is a problem with, all right, there are three major networks if you want to consider the brain working in this fashion for attention and focus. We have the central executive network, whose job it is to help us like solving problems externally, like if you're asked a question, are you going to run again? Where it has to coordinate memory and speech processing, focus on the outside, versus the default mode network, whose job it is to look inward and reminisce maybe, or think, gee, I'm so bored with this, when do I get out of here, I'm tired, whatever. The inward focus. And then you have the salience network, which is medial frontal lobe. And its job is to switch back and forth based on the importance it assigns to the task at hand. Is this an inward-looking task, or is this an outward-looking task? And its job is to switch back and forth. With a head injury, and yes, Senator McConnell fell and sustained a concussion. And with the number of falls he's had, well, here's his fall with a concussion.
Senator Mitch McConnell is home tonight, released from a physical therapy rehab facility where he was treated for a concussion and a broken rib. McConnell tripped and fell at a dinner 2 weeks ago.
With concussion, head injury, symptoms of adynamia can be something that happens. Trouble, well, here's the definition for adynamia. As you see, one of the problems is initiating behavior or reacting to communication speech. Many people with adynamia will often just like stare blankly. It's like, hello? The reason is because the salience network, which is here, does not switch between inward-looking and outward-looking, does not recognize the need to switch between modes. So there's damage to the system that switches you from looking inside to looking outside, or outside to looking inward when you need to do these tasks. And this is extremely common with people with traumatic brain injury. And as we know, he did suffer one. And so as a result, he may be having kind of an adynamic depersonalization. I get these sometimes. And I'm not thinking about anything. I'm not thinking, gee, I'd rather be somewhere else. I mean, daydreaming is always a possibility, but that's not what you see here. This looks more like something like this. So it could be an adynamic type of depersonalization, which is due to brain injury in the salience network and problems with the default mode network. That's something else it could be. There's one other possibility that came to my mind when I saw this, and that is normal pressure hydrocephalus, NPH. You see this with a lot of older folks. And what that is we have cerebrospinal fluid that surrounds the brain, and it bathes, protects it. It's, you know, the thing is, it should drain back into the circulation, filtered out and goes back. But sometimes as we get older, it does not drain like it should. And what happens is that with it accumulating like that, well, here are some of the symptoms, by the way, and I'll explain treatment. As you see on the bottom there, the bottom portion of the list of symptoms, slowness in responding, often verbally, kind of that flat look, that flat affect, because it affects the frontal lobe. Lack of spontaneity and problems responding to communication with verbal clumsiness and a lot of tripping and falling. Senator McConnell's fallen a bunch of times. He does meet the criteria here, and there's probable and possible NPH. Does he have NPH? It can be fixed. All of these problems can be helped, can be treated. But ultimately, it requires him to act. And part of the reason I'm bringing these up is because it's important for you, if you see any of these kind of things in your loved ones, to understand different causes. If they're locking up on you, if they're responding like this, these can be taken care of. These can be helped. And it's important to understand, hey, yeah, this isn't anything, it's definitely needs medical attention, but at the same time, there are things that can be done. And like for NPH, you put a shunt in to help drain it. It's a surgical procedure. It's not, but it's pretty straightforward too. And by correcting it, a person will return to a more normal level of function. Many times people are diagnosed with dementia who have NPH, and a shunt will fix the symptoms. But you've got to identify it. And that's the hardest thing of all, because many people say, it's an old person, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, whatever. No, they have NPH. And if you correct NPH, and that's what this looks a lot like to me, but it could be adynamia from traumatic brain injury. It could be a TIA, or it could be absent seizures. The only way to find out is with thorough testing. And I suspect he's had it, and they may have even told him. I don't know. None of us knows. It could be a cardiac dysrhythmia, because sometimes if you have heart dysrhythmia of some sort, it also disrupts the oxygen flow to the brain momentarily. Maybe. It could be nutritional. Hypoglycemia will also do things like this, although there are other characteristic signs too, but maybe momentarily. Senator McConnell is 81 years old, and there's no denying that as we get older, our brains and our bodies don't function as well. The thing is, it's important to be assessed, and it is important to take care of the things that are wrong with us as we get older. But if we do, and if we're diligent, there's no reason we cannot continue to function. But it is important that we do take proper care of ourselves. That is what matters. And that we take care of our friends, our loved ones, and those of us with acquired brain injury need to remember we are more vulnerable to things like this. And it is important for others to keep an eye on us, and for us to keep an eye on ourselves to mitigate these kind of effects as we get older. A big part of being a good survivor is to make sure we keep on top of symptoms like that and not just try and wave them away, especially those of us who have more responsibilities. So those are the probable things, as well as maybe less probable. And we'll see what happens in the future. Hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please put them below, and see you soon.